Hey folks, how's it going here on Saturday? I'm talking about earthquakes, volcanoes. Oh, this thing. Wait a second. Come on. Sorry about that. Having some weird things going on here. So we're talking about um, about the about earthquakes and volcanoes and things like that today. And sorry, little technical glitch here. Let me bring the chart up here again. Okay, and so we're I have some case studies here as well that I'm going to use to show these things, and you can see here. Let me see. Let me pull this up. That I'm going to be looking at some charts of earthquakes and volcanoes and whatnot, of things that are happening right now, or things from the recent past, actually from the last this last century, that show the tendency for volcanoes, earthquakes, and things like that, and how we can, and where we're at right now, because we're certainly in a phase right now where there could be more of a tendency to have those things happen, and for several months. And so I want to first show you. I can see there's already some comments about can I talk about Chile, this and that. I'm not doing that. It's not a free-for-all. I have some case studies and some actual charts that I'm showing. It's a case studies, and then predictions, and you'll see why I'm talking about those things now. So this is we just had a eruption of this very active volcano in Indonesia, which has a lot of volcanoes, a lot of volcanic activity. You see, this is the chart of that moment here, the volcano Krakatoa, I guess that's how you say it, just a couple days ago or early yesterday. And there's a few things that I want to really show you that give a signature for volcanic activity. The things that we want to look at is, you see there's this Mars, Saturn, and also Jupiter conjunction or association, especially Mars and Saturn. And then you also see things like where they wind up being in places that are close to the angles from the moon, like close to the 4th, 7th, or 10th houses from the moon. So the moon is, of course, one of the most important, because the moon has the most gravitational effect on the Earth. So a lot of this is actually things like gravity and those kinds of principles. This gravity, the gravitational force of the moon, has a lot to do with obviously the weather, but also natural phenomena that affect the Earth, such as earthquakes and this seismic activity. Because again, what happens is the gravity of the moon, pulling on the mantle of the Earth, opens up and really starts to produce a certain amount of seismic activity that is seen in the earthquakes and volcanoes and things like that. Earthquakes and volcanoes are obviously from similar sources. It's the Earth's mantle and Earth's crust moving around. Of course, a volcano is when it releases magma, and an earthquake is just when the plates shift and then snap back. The earthquake and but you have similar signatures for each. So this is what we're going to look at. So as we just saw, this is the one that just happened, and this is the exact moment that it happened. I don't have exact moments for all of the seismic events, but I do for a couple of them. So this happened right as the moon had just went into Scorpio, This was again on April the 10th in Indonesia at 8 o'clock at night. So as you see the ascendant moving very fast, the ascendant had just gone into Scorpio and just was crossing this moon. So the moon was just rising as the ash started to be released from the volcano at 8 p.m. Again, so that's when it started, and then it actually started to erupt a few hours later. But you can see the similarities of what I'm talking about. We have Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter all kind of there. Now they're in the third house from the moon, but then we also have Sun and Mercury in the fifth house from the moon. So this fourth house, this first angle, is pretty much taken up with this energy. These planets are very close to that fourth angle. But Venus is also right in the seventh house from the moon as well. So you can see that all of the planets are either very close to the fourth angle or in the seventh house angle from the moon. And then the ascendant moves up into place with that. And you see this stress on the Earth's crust. Now, this particular moon was very important because it was actually that full moon, that super moon, right? Which means that the moon was very close to the Earth when this happened. So again, the moon's influence on the Earth has a lot to do with it. Full moons and new moons can tend to really create this seismic activity. Often it's full moons, because on a full moon you have the sun on one side of the Earth and the moon on the other side. And so this sun and moon pulling on the Earth with the sun on one side and the moon on the other, again, are what tend to pull open and create the possibility of this seismic activity. And then with the other planets in angles and with each other, like this Mars-Saturn conjunction, and also with Jupiter there, it also pulls and brings this stress. Now, you'll hear scientists say that there's not a lot of gravitational force, that these planets don't have any gravitational force or much gravitational force on us. Like Jupiter doesn't have much gravitational force on us, etc. But what happens is when these planets line up, when they join each other, the force that they exert is going to be on the Earth itself as a body certainly increases, because again, all of these planets moving around the sun, they all have obviously a spatial and gravitational influence on each other. Meaning that the Earth's orbit doesn't just happen by itself. Of course, it's actually orbiting the moon as well, based on a thing called the barycenter. It's not just that the moon is orbiting the Earth, but the Earth is also in an orbital relationship with the moon. It's not exactly one orbiting the other. There's a thing called the barycenter, which means that the moon is actually orbiting a spot not exactly at the center of the Earth. And even though it's slight, the Earth is also in some way orbiting the moon. It's not orbiting the moon, but it's in a dynamic with the moon. And by the way, this is why the lunar nodes aren't always 100% retrograde, because sometimes based on this barycenter, the nodes themselves, which is the relationship between the sun, moon, and Earth, the nodes themselves actually, it's why the sun and moon itself, this is why they, the relationship between the sun, moon, and Earth is what causes the nodes and the eclipses. So, based on the fact that sometimes the nodes aren't always going retrograde, sometimes they station and go direct, is seen by this barycenter phenomena. So anyway, I'm not going to read comments because they distract me. So I'm just going to go through. I'll look at some comments and questions maybe later, but I don't feel like trying to figure out what people are saying, with all due respect. And I'm sure it's fine what people are saying, but I don't want to get distracted because it's a lot. Okay, so anyway, you can see this happened here. And again, it was right as the moon, this big moon, we had just had a full moon, and the moon is very close to the Earth. Not only is it close to the Earth, but then Mars, Sun, and Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter are close to the first angle, and then the sun is close to the other angle. So again, in that fourth house, you have a lot of energy pulling sideways, and then Venus is opposite the moon, pulling opposite, right? So again, you have to remember that the Earth is right here. The Earth is in the middle, where all this writing, whoops, let me pull it here. So where all this writing is on this chart, this is where the Earth would be. So again, you have Venus on one side of the Earth and the moon on the other side. Moon is in Scorpio, Venus is in Taurus, so it's opposite, completely opposite. And then in this angle, which is like over here, like over here, you have Mars and Sun and Jupiter and Saturn. They're all kind of on this other side, sort of pulling, okay? So this is the one that just happened. Now we're going to have this Mars-Saturn here, Mars-Saturn-Jupiter until early May. So certainly between now and early May, which includes the next lunation cycle, the next time the moon hits this, which, if I bring this up, I'll bring this up the next few days. Again, damn this thing. So, for example, around this time, even April 14th, 15th, so as we get here, like the 15th and 16th, you might see more volcanic activity in this volcano. I wouldn't be surprised. This is a very active volcano. I'm going to talk about this one a little bit more in a second. But April 15th and 16th, for example, I wouldn't be surprised if this volcano starts, gets reactivated again. If we see more seismic activity here on the 15th and 16th, I wouldn't be surprised at all. When the moon hits this, because now you're having all this energy with the moon. And I'm going to show you in a minute some of these volcano charts, and you'll see why I say that. But then also, as we get closer to the new moon, also right around here, also as we get to the 21st, 22nd, again, major possibility of more volcanic activity as we get near this lunation cycle here, because we also have this, again, Mars, Saturn now are in this 10th angle from the moon, and the moon has joined the sun. So again, imagine that the Earth is in the center, and now sun and moon are both pulling on it from the same direction. When you have the new moons, when you have the full moons, one is pulling on one side, one's pulling on the other, and then the planets that are in the other angles are pulling in opposite ways. So again, you can just think of it this way. They're pulling like this and like this. So these planets in the 10th house from this full moon, from this new moon and sun, are like all the energy is here, and then you have all these planets over here yanking it on this direction, right? And it's those outer planets. And Jupiter has enormous gravity. The gravity of Jupiter is huge. So is Saturn. So again, this very, very much could show some seismic activity again as we get to around the 21st, 22nd. And again, what winds up happening is the ascendant often triggers it. So you'll see here a few of these charts. Here is a very well-known one. This is the Sumatra earthquake that happened, same area that created the big tidal wave in 2004. It was December 26, 2004. This is the exact time that the explosion happened, that the earthquake happened under the sea that created the tidal wave. So this is exactly the time that it happened. Look, full moon. Again, the Earth is in the middle. That's what you want to keep remembering. Okay, the Earth is in the middle. This was a full moon. Look at this, exact full moon. The sun was here in Sagittarius, 10 degrees. The moon was Mrigashira, 4 degrees. So full moon pulling on the Earth's crust. This is when this happened. And then again, now you have Saturn here, retrograde. Again, Saturn was close in retrograde. This is also one of the reasons why I'm saying what's going to happen is Saturn and Jupiter are going to go retrograde here as well very soon. So when Saturn and Jupiter both go retrograde, they're also closer to the Earth at that time. But you see, Saturn was retrograde here. It was very close to the Earth at that time. And again, we have Jupiter was in the 10th house angle from the moon and from the sun. So Jupiter was also in an angle from both of the luminaries. So again, you have this pulling going on. And again, this Saturn was very close to the moon as well, about 1 Rashi away. So again, and this Mars, Venus, Mercury were very close to the sun. Okay. So again, you can see how these planets bunch up next to the sun or the moon. And again, you can see just the effect of pulling on the mantle a little bit, right? So these are, these are the kinds of things that you want to look at as signatures for creating the possibility of having the, the earthquakes and the volcanoes and stuff like that. So you can see that very clearly in that Sumatra earthquake. And this was huge. If you remember, this is what killed all those people, and it went up into India and into Asia. One second. Okay, so this, I have a few other charts that were from, these are actually charts of the most powerful earthquakes of the last couple hundred years. This one was also in Indonesia. This was April 10th, 1815. And you can see very similar to what we have. Again, look at the date. Look at the calendar date, April 10th. And look at this one that just happened. Whoops. Oh, where is I just had it. Oh, it's because I moved the chart. Okay. Ugh. This one that just happened was April 10th. This is the one that just happened was also on April 10th. So this shows April 10th, the one that just happened had the sun in Pisces, like we would have, and it had Mars, Saturn, Jupiter in Capricorn. Look at the one. This was a gigantic one that happened. This was April 10th, 1815. And it was, the sun, of course, was also in Pisces. Sun and Mercury were in Pisces, just like we have now. And Saturn, Mars were in Capricorn, like we have now. And look at the moon. You say, well, the moon is not joined. The moon was a new moon. It was a couple hours after new. In fact, it was closer to a new moon than this one we just had was closer to the full moon. You see, this one, the sun is 28. The moon is only 1 degree. So this happened right on the new moon, a couple hours after the exact new moon. We had this gigantic volcano, and Tambora, if I call up, let me bring out the notes here. I pulled out notes. And it really, chart notes, this one, April 10th, Tambora eruption was the largest in modern history. According to the Global Volcanism Program, it was the only eruption that at least 1,000 years to rate VE7. The eruption of Mount Tambora in what is now Indonesia cast a veil of ash around the world, lowering the global temperatures by more than 5 degrees Fahrenheit. The result was the year without a summer in 1816. A foot of snow fell in Quebec in June. Crops failed worldwide in what historian John Post called the last great subsistence crisis of the Western world. Look at that. So we're having very similar times right now to this volcano. This was the most devastating volcano in modern history. When they say modern history, they're going back hundreds of years. They're going back into the 10th, 11th, 12th century. So this was devastating. And again, look, you also even have Jupiter opposite the sun and moon. Because, remember, this is basically a new moon. The moon is only 3 degrees away from the sun. And Jupiter is opposite, pulling this way. And Mars and Saturn are squaring the moon, pulling the other way. So this is the one we just had. Sun, Mercury here, Mars, Saturn, and the moon here. But Jupiter's also there. So very devastating earthquake. Now this is the same volcano that just erupted, this Krakatoa. You should research this because it's fascinating. This eruption here was also huge. And what it wound up doing, this eruption, basically was the obliteration of the entire island of Krakatoa in a series of eruptions ending on August 27, 1883. Is in many ways the most famous modern volcanic cataclysm The sound of the explosion was heard some 3,000 miles away across the Indian Ocean. This is the one, this particular one was the gigantic one that devastated all of it. When it said it ended, it means that what happened after this is it completely destroyed this gigantic volcano. It literally, the whole thing shattered in half. Usually what happens is part of the volcano blows away, which is what happened to this Krakatoa in 2018. A big part of it got blown off, but the base still remained. What happened in this one in 1883 is the whole island was completely smashed and totally destroyed. This gigantic island that rose up out of the sea was totally obliterated. That's why it says it was one of the most famous ones ever. But not only that, like if you go to YouTube or whatever and type in Krakatoa, you'll also see how this one that just erupted was actually built on the same magma flow, the same swell that this one was previously occupying after it was destroyed. So what I'm saying is that this eruption here on August 27th, 1883, which destroyed this previous island, completely destroyed it, was then later rebuilt for decades. In the same spot, it grew like 5 centimeters a day for decades until it rose to like, I don't know how high it was, a few thousand meters, and then was destroyed again in 2018. So again, this whole history with this volcano is pretty fascinating, this Krakatoa. It's really remarkable to see YouTube videos of this thing being reconstituted in the middle of the ocean. It's pretty amazing to see that this whole thing being, you see like these water plumes coming up and shooting up as the volcanic island is being rebuilt. And this was at the time when we had video cameras, so you can see it in real time. It's really wild. So this is another one that happened in Alaska. Again, this was June 6, 1912. This time isn't correct. I don't have the exact time. But this is the day. And again, look at this. We have Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Sun. They're all joined. Jupiter is opposite. So again, look at the opposition, and they're all squaring the moon. So the moon is in Aquarius here, and then you have Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Sun in one angle, in the fourth angle, and then opposite that, you have Jupiter in the 10th angle pulling, and then Mars is almost in the 7th. So again, it's in the 6th, but it's very close to also being exactly opposite. So again, you see the moon, all these planets in these angles from the moon, and usually with a whole big stellium, or with almost every planet either join the moon, opposite the moon, or in these angles from the moon. Like almost the whole chart, you'll see that everything is in this kind of pulling energy, right? And again, you can see on this one here, whoops, let me pull it back up again. You can see on this one here, these are all in fixed signs as well. And of course, fixed signs are like solid, and then they're very combustible. They can blow, right? And so again, moon in Aquarius, and then Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Sun in Taurus, and then Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde. But then again, even Mars is almost in the exact angle as well, but it's close to it. So again, you want to notice that these are directions, and these are, everything is not exactly right on. Like, for example, we have a thing in Vedic astrology called directional strength, or what's called Digbala, right? So you have directional strength in 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses. But the actual bala itself, the strength, isn't necessarily that it has to be there. It's how close it is to that thing. So, for example, the moon, when it's close to the 4th house, it has directional strength, which means when it's in the 3rd or the 5th house or near it, it still has a lot of directional strength because it's near it. And when it's over by the 10th house, then it's as far away from it as possible. So I'm telling you that because it doesn't have to be that it's exactly in the angle. Like we have with this chart, even the fact, well, several of them are in the angles, but even Mars is very close to it. It's not in the 7th, but it's in the 6th. So it's really quite close to this opposition. It's less than one sign. And when you consider all the other ones are there, it's quite compelling. So then we also have this one. Okay, this was in 1991. This was in the Philippines. This was also a big earthquake. Again, I don't have these rising signs exact. They didn't have the ascendant. I didn't feel like researching the actual ascendant. So don't pay attention to the ascendant. It's too much work to find the exact time. I just found the dates. And so, but with that, we have the moon here. And again, look, we have moon, Venus, Jupiter, Mars, all in one sign. And Saturn opposite. Again, it's just, you see it the whole time. It's very clear this is what's making it happen. Again, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Moon, and Saturn is opposite. And then the sun is quite close. Oh yeah, this is Tritya. This is only the 3rd lunar day. So again, this is the 3rd lunar day, which was the same as the one we just had. This one was also on Tritya. The one that we just had here was also the 3rd lunar day after the full moon. This one is the 3rd lunar day after the new moon. So again, the 3rd, that's still very early, okay? Tritya, the 3rd Tithi, is still very close to the new moon or full moon. Again, because the first day is the Amavasya or the Purnima, which is the new moon or full moon day. Then you have day 1. It's like 1 day after the full moon or new moon. Day 2 is 2 days after the full or new moon. Day 3, it's just 3 days after the new moon or full moon. So that's still very close to the lunation cycle, right? So you can see why it hit that moment. Because again, if it was here, whoops, let me pull up the chart. So again, if it's here, 1 day, 2 days, but then on the 3rd day, the 3rd day after that full moon, now it hits all these other planets. Now it hits Venus, Jupiter, Mars, moves into the opposition with Saturn. That's why you see Tritya. So you have all these planets already lined up in that kind of opposition with that kind of intensity. They're all lined up there. Then you have a new moon, and then the moon hits it. And again, because the moon is the thing that's pulling on the Earth the most. So it's like the moon has to line up mainly to force all of that seismic activity. So this is the way you see it. All those other planets are sitting there. They're sitting there in that moment, but then the moon is the thing that's the most relevant because the moon is just right next door to the Earth. So then the moon lines up in a special relationship, and then bam, that starts to pull on the crust or whatever, and then that opens it up. So again, this is very clear. That's why I wanted to just show you all these charts. And again, this is just on a website. If you Google, this isn't picked over. I pulled these charts right off a website that said, I literally Googled 5 most powerful volcanoes in recent, of the recent times, something like that. 5 largest volcanoes in recent memory or something like that. And these are the dates right off it. It was no cherry picking. I wasn't looking for it. These are the 5 that came up. And then I also remembered the Sumatra earthquake, and I pulled that one up as well. So this is what research is. This is how, if you're a good astrologer, which I'll call myself that, this is how you learn this stuff. You figure it out. You look at charts to see what's doing it. And then you learn a little bit about maybe seismology or what's actually going on with when we have an earthquake or a volcano. And it becomes pretty obvious why these are the things that are going to make it happen. So, where we're at going forward here is we have these placements are going to be here for a while, like I said. And I want to talk in a minute about Iceland in a second. Someone did mention in the comments before I came about Iceland. And yes, we're seeing some very singular activity up in Iceland right now, seismic activity, which could be very ominous. And we're really in a time right now where earthquakes and volcanoes and all that could be very devastating. So again, as we go forward here, this is April 17th, April 24th. Again, all this time, Mars is here. These planets are here, set up this way. Now, again, like you said, and like I already said, we have a couple times coming up here where we'll go back and show these days again. Again, April 15th, April 16th, there could definitely be some more seismic activity, especially with this volcano in Indonesia that's already active. It's active as hell already, and it's starting to spew more ash and lava. This thing could be going off for a while, particularly around this time. This definitely. I could even make a prediction right now that I think April 22nd or 23rd, there could be major volcanic activity, especially with this volcano, or shortly after. Maybe it'll happen when we get here, the 26th, because now it's joined Venus. It's opposite where it just happened. But I think it would be more likely. I think one of the reasons why this thing that just recently happened wasn't as big is because these aren't as precise. Venus is opposite. Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter are close to the fourth house. Sun is close to the fourth house. But when we get around to here, first of all, this is more intense because now the moon is joined. But especially when we get here, especially like this day, I say the 22nd, 23rd, April 22nd, 23rd. This is a very powerful signature. All these three planets are in the 10th house from the moon on a new moon. This is the signature. By the way, it's also in Aries. And Aries is ruled by Mars. And Mars is also aspecting it. Literally, Mars is casting a fourth house aspect, particularly on the 24th. Around this time, this is really compelling. And I would be highly surprised if there weren't some kind of major seismic activity, maybe with this volcano or another one. It could also be shortly after. We've also seen the second and third day. By the way, the third day is Akshaya Tritiya. I already talked about how Akshaya Tritiya is one of the most auspicious days of the year, and that's happening as well. So we'll see. But if we go forward again, we also have this. Again, these are other dates with Mars still there. The 30th and 31st. Again, now we have the moon is opposite here, and the sun is in the 10th house. And again, this is now opposite, and this pulling effect is there. And then we also have this full moon here in May. So again, every time we get near one of these signatures, again, we come over here. Now Saturn is retrograde, Jupiter's retrograde. When these planets get retrograde, it also can increase the effect. I know on one of them we had a big this one, Saturn was deeply retrograde because again, it's closer to the Earth. The Sumatra one too, Saturn was retrograde. I remember that. Saturn was retrograde. And in here, Jupiter was retrograde. Yeah, I remember this one too. So you'll often see one of these outer planets retrograde when it happens. We're going to have both retrograde. Again, when we get into this point, we're going to have both of them retrograde now as we get here. And again, you can see, because I've showed you. Now, what happens is the lunation cycles start to move away from the angles. So again, it could start to wane here now, because now the full moons and new moons aren't corresponding with the planets in the angles. This one, Mars is still in the angle, and Saturn and Jupiter are still close. But I would think that at this time, it might start to minimize. Right? We go around here. You know, now when the sun winds up being here, like when we get around this point, again, now, okay, so Jupiter's gone back into Sagittarius. So again, you start to see where some of the indicators shift. But I do know that later in the year, there's definitely it'll reprise again, because Mars is going to be, I mainly want to look at around the end of the year, around this time, when Saturn and Jupiter go back up, and then Mars like around here. This is the end, or early next year, it really starts to rise again, particularly with Mars up here as well. So definitely the next few months and at different points during the year, we could really see some of this seismic activity. Okay. I've said this recently as I've talked a little bit about the coronavirus and the dangers and that we're going to get through it and all. One of the main things I've said is that a few of the things that worry me more is especially these things, these signatures for volcanic and earthquake activity, this seismic activity. This is why. Now, I want to also show something here that is also happening. Right now, Iceland is becoming very volcanic or earthquake. Awakening volcanic region in Iceland could cause disruption for centuries. So volcanic activity is escalating in a region of Iceland that hasn't erupted for 800 years, with scientists warning it could cause disruptions for centuries. Since January 21st, the Reykjanes Peninsula southwest of Iceland's capital has experienced more than 8,000 earthquakes and about 10 centimeters of land uplift due to magma intrusions underground. Now, this is what I'm talking about. It seems that after relatively inactive for many centuries, this region is waking up, situated close to the town of Grindavik, the popular Blue Lagoon tourist attraction, etc. So it's right here. So last period of volcanic activity began in 10th century and continued until the 13th. Unlike typical Icelandic volcanoes, which tend to wake for a few and then die down, when this region gets going, it appears to sputter on for up to 300 years. Okay, so again, this is something that's, again, a recent occurrence. And again, when we look at the chart here, and we look at what we're talking about, again, it said since January 21st. Okay. And so again, January 21st, when we go back, what happened then, is we had Saturn move into Capricorn, into Capricorn on the 25th. So literally, okay, this is the 21st. Okay, so again, 21st, Saturn is here. But shortly thereafter, Saturn has moved into Capricorn. So again, 800-year shift happening that we haven't seen since, since. And Saturn moved into Capricorn. And then, of course, now we have Jupiter there. Jupiter moves in. And then Mars is there now. So these things are happening now. And so we see here Kilauea volcano eruption, December 25th, 2019, right on the exact day of the solar eclipse. Volcano expelled some 320,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of lava. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I do remember that. Thank you for bringing that up. So yes, we had that Kilauea volcano eruption as well. There's absolutely no doubt that seismic activity is directly related to lunation cycles. Absolutely not. And there's no debate about this. You just need to research it. As you just saw, especially major volcanic eruptions and earthquakes and stuff like that. So this is why I wanted to bring this up and show this research and get it out formally, because I've been saying it off and on, and I haven't done a formal video about it. And then I've been meaning to do it for a couple weeks. And then last night, whenever it was, that volcano started rumbling And I'm like, okay, I want to get this out because I've been talking about this for a while. And again, that one wasn't devastating. I mean, there was no loss of life or anything, but I'll be honest, I'm worried about that. I'm worried, especially, again, as you see where we're at right now with this, is that right now we're here. It happened here. And again, look at the difference between this chart, which this isn't a major explosion that destroyed an island and killed a bunch of people. That's not what this was. And you can see why. Because all of these things that I just talked about that are signatures are not as strong. This is how it works. This is after the new moon. It's on the third day after the full moon, rather. And these planets are there, but they're not quite in the angle. They're not quite, Venus is opposite, but these are kind of just surrounding that fourth house. But it's all still concentrated. Those factors are still lined up. But when we get to what's happening later, like when you compare it to this, right after the new moon, and the moon is there, and these planets are right in the angle, Jupiter is retrograde opposite the sun, opposite that new moon, everything, bam, you can see it's all concentrated here on this one, which was devastating. You could see on this one, which was devastating, right? That we have this moon Mars, and Saturn is very close. Saturn and Mars are very close in this 1883 one, right? And we also have Jupiter very close. They're all very close to this moon, right? And it's actually waning here, but these planets are very close to this moon, especially Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. They're all surrounding it. And this is also a good example of, this is Kalasarpa, but they're all on this side. I don't think I analyzed this one yet. Also, all the planets are on one side. Again, the Earth is in the middle. So notice how in this case, all the planets are also all on one side. They're all pulling on one side. And the Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter are all right on top of the moon. They're all surrounding the moon. Again, these aren't very far away. Again, 17 degrees, the moon is 3, Mars is 9, and then Jupiter is 2. They're all just like, if you looked up in the sky, you would see the moon. If you looked up in the sky on this day, that night, you would see the moon here, but then you would see the other planets all within, like spatially, they're not that far away. They're all right around the moon. All those big planets, those outer planets on that one. Again, then you look at this one, you see all this stuff lined up in these angles, like I said. This one, same way, they're all lined up in these angles, retrograde, bam, everything snaps into place. This Sumatra earthquake, on the full moon, Saturn retrograde, Mars, Venus, all close to the sun, close to the moon. Jupiter is in an angle from the moon. So that's why what I just showed you in contrast to where we are now, this is what happened now, and it started spewing some ash. It didn't really erupt very much. It spewed some ash and a little bit of an eruption, but it's active. These volcanoes get active. They don't just blow once. Some little thing gets created, and then tension gets released. And you can see as we go forward here that it's going to be here in the next few days. And then again, like I said, we get up to here. This is going to be major. 22nd, 23rd, 24th. Could be some major stuff here. And then we get around here. Again, bam, you got all these planets right on these angles. Then we get another full moon over here. You still have Saturn and Jupiter now. Again, this also through May. We get here again. We have it again. Every time the moon hits these big conjunctions, Saturn is retrograde here. And we get up to here. Now Saturn and Jupiter are both retrograde. Maybe right before that new, like right around here, March, like May 21st. Again, another one, May 21st, May 20th, May 21st. Again, so this is how you look at it. This is how you look at it. You see this starts to get close to that new moon, and these planets are now retrograde, so they're close to the Earth. So I worry that these could be these could be some intense times coming up. And people often ask, do you know where it's going to happen? I don't. Some people maybe can do that. I don't really know anyone who's ever done it reliably predictable. Everybody can get lucky once in a while. And frankly, some astrologers, they overstate their accuracy about these things. They get one prediction right out of 15 that they get wrong, and they keep talking about the time they got it right. As far as like a location. I said it was going to be here and something happened there. They had something. Like, okay, how many times did they say it in the location and it's not right? So all of the places that have a lot of seismic vulnerability, of course, that area of Asia, the Ring of Fire, which includes even up to Alaska, the Pacific Rim. I used to live in San Francisco. Any of those places, that stuff can happen. So that's a big, it's big time, potentiality here to have some major seismic activity here in the next few months. And then it'll resurface later in the year. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Appreciate some of the comments. So I'm glad someone, Deanie said, this is an interesting topic. I signed up for your Astrology A to Z. Looking forward to studying. Great. Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, the Astrology A to Z is coming up next weekend, and it's a lot of people. It's already over 100 people, and the call can only handle 100. So people will have to show up to get their place. So so glad that people showed up, and I don't want to get too, someone's asking about COVID-19. I've talked about it so much. This isn't about that. So anyway, I hope this was enjoyable, that people like this. And for those, I did mean to just say, if you there's I did talk about the never mind, went away. I was going to say that people can get the presentation, or you can get the 2020 forecast. Those who haven't gotten it yet, there are some new people. Here it is. I'm just gonna I'll put it in the comments. So those who haven't got the 2020 forecast, you can definitely you'll want to find out about how a lot of these upcoming transits will affect you. You can go to 2020vedicastrology.com. Here's the link. You go to 2020vedicastrology.com. I put the link in the chat box. And again, for those of you who haven't, you can see this is a web class that I did for 2020. And you can see, again, I did all this before any COVID-19 or anything showed up. And you can see how much I talked about this part of the year, March 29th to May 4th, May 10th, until September, but March 22nd to May 4th, March 22nd to March 29th to June 29th. All of these things, I knew this was going to be a huge time before any of it happened. We have the eclipses coming up, all these retrograde cycles. This is free. You just go to that website. You can click yes, reserve my seat now. You can either watch it right now, instant replay. It's over an hour long, or you can set up a time, any of these times, to sit down and watch it, and then you just register for it. And so again, You'll also learn what Saturn in Capricorn for your sign and what to commit to for the next couple years, because regardless of what's going on in 2020, Saturn is in Capricorn for the next couple years, and your whole life is shifting and has shifted in that direction, whether you know it or not. It's all about getting real in some way, and it's about this Saturn in Capricorn nature. Again, whether you know it or not. So everybody will learn that for their sign, and how Saturn in Capricorn is going to show you what to commit to for the next couple years. And so that's all part of the free web class. So you can go there and check it out as well. And so you guys, I hope you have a good day, and you have a good one.